Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of See and Learn 2022. Here we are at another really cool venue. Look at this view. We're surrounded by Ceba's mountains and the seas. We're in the village of St. John's at Lollipops. Lollipop is known for her local cuisine. So tonight there's things on the menu that aren't found on every restaurant. So crab back, oxtail soup, and goat, in addition to some of her other great food. But it's not about just the food. We also have a great presenter. We had to switch gears a little bit, but tonight we have Florentine Zwillich, who is going to teach us another way that volcanoes are studied, through rocks. So quite interesting. And we got a little mini presentation from California Academy of Sciences to introduce their Islands 2030 project and how they're helping us and other islands around the world. So stay tuned. We're going to get started before long. Thank you to CaribTrans for our live streaming, and thanks for coming locally and all around the world. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the village of St. John's on Ceba. Oh, Larry. Oh, yay. That's the projector. Just so you know, that's the projector. Nobody use that as a maypole. Okay, really, if you're going to walk anybody, just go around this way, please. All right, welcome Friday night at See and Learn. We're at Lollipops. Let's say thank you to our host, Lollipops. Yay! We have a very nice evening, double feature tonight. Everybody's got a drink ready, so we're going to start off with a mini presentation before we do our main presentation this evening. So we're going, and it really is mini this time, Andres. I saw that look. I'm going to introduce you first to Laurel Allen, and she and Lauren, who was doing the night hike last night, and Andrea are from California Academy of Sciences, which is located at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco Bay Area. And they're doing a really cool special project and doing great work around the world. So in addition to that, Laurel is doing a really special project for SEBA. So let's welcome her and listen to all the cool things.
Thank you, Lynn. And thanks to all of you. I know you're here for volcanoes, so I will talk fast, 15 minutes. But yeah, we're really excited to be here, and we just wanted to introduce you to this project that we have started in collaboration with See and Learn, and ultimately with the whole community of SEBA, and get your feedback. It is a sneak peek. We're really, really early in this work. So a lot of what you're going to see is pretty rough, but again, we just want to show it to you, see what you think so far, get your feedback, recommendations, suggestions, that kind of stuff. So here we go. This is just for a quick intro to the Academy, because I'm sure a lot of folks haven't heard of us. So it's the California Academy of Sciences. As an institution, we're based in, as Lynn said, San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. We're a public science museum, so inside you'll find an aquarium, planetarium, rainforest, natural history museum, and then in the basement we keep about 100 in-house scientists who are in about 8 different fields. And so we're a research institution as well. And in addition to the scientists, it's scientific collections. So we have about 46 million expeditions all over the world, on and on, really big program. And we are also home to iNaturalist, which I think a lot of you are already familiar with. But if not, it is one of the largest online community science platforms in the world. So it's kind of a home base for identifications and observations, and a really important tool for a lot of scientists as well as land managers and things like that. So that's us at home. Oh, sure. Oh, sorry. So the roof is, so this is our living roof, and it's, the building was designed by an architect named Renzo Piano. You're really messing up my 15 minutes, Lynn. I'm going to take 2 more. But it's modeled after the 7 hills of San Francisco, and yeah, it really is living, and it's a really important habitat for a lot of pollinators and birds and things like that. So if you come to the Academy, this is something that you can go up on the roof and see, and it's a pretty cool, it also keeps the building cool and does lots of green stuff. Green. So that is us at home, but in the world, our work kind of takes place via 3 global initiatives. We have Hope for Reefs, Thrive in California, which is focused on the whole state of California, and the reason we're here today, which is Islands 2030. So this is a new initiative for the Academy, a really major undertaking. And the mission is to halt biodiversity loss on 5 key tropical island archipelagos by the year 2030 while empowering and benefiting local communities. And this initiative is co-directed by 2 of our curators. We have Dr. Lauren Esposito, who's here tonight. And then those of you here last year may have met Dr. Raina Bell as well. So a question we get a lot is, why does an institution in San Francisco care about islands? And the answer is that they are really critical hotspots of biodiversity. So islands actually have the greatest concentration of biodiversity on our planet. And that's the really good news. The really bad news is that 75% of all recent bird, reptile, amphibian, and mammal extinctions have taken place on islands. And of those remaining species, about 85% are highly threatened. And that includes half of all birds. So because islands are so critical, the Academy as an institution has actually been working on them for over a century. This footage is from an expedition to the Galapagos in, I think, 1932. But we actually started working there in 1905, and if any of you have been to the Galapagos, you've probably passed through Academy Bay, which is kind of a funny legacy of that work. But this long-time investment is really true for each of the 5 archipelagos that we are working in through this initiative. So we have the Galapagos, Lesser Antilles, Sao Tome and Principe, Madagascar, and the Philippines. But what's really special about this initiative is that up until now, those the work that's taken place in those locations has really been scientists kind of alone in the field. So with Islands 2030, it's the first time that the Academy has kind of brought together like the full might of the institution. So now it's not just scientists working alone, it's also scientists and educators and communicators and marketing departments and exhibits teams. So we're really hoping to make a really big impact with that work. And one of those teams is my team, which is called Digital Engagement. We are science communicators and storytellers and strategists, and we work across a really wide range of platforms. That includes our social media channels. We're actually one of the largest in the world in terms of social presences for all aquariums, zoos, natural history museums, and science museums. But we work on other platforms as well. And when it comes to supporting a new project, the first thing we do is take a look at the existing space and just see what the opportunities or needs are. And one thing that was really interesting for us right off the bat when we started thinking about Islands work was the app landscape. So when you look at apps, there are actually like quite a lot of Islands related apps out there, but they're pretty terrible, really. Like what they do essentially is surface the same kind of information that you find on tourism websites. So they surface like attractions, restaurants, accommodations, transportation. And what's not surprising is that a lot of those apps aren't even owned by the islands themselves or even authorized. They're just done by people in other countries who are scraping the tourism website. And then they create these kind of terrible apps and they charge people for them, and it's a pretty bad experience. So that's kind of terrible, but what's even worse is what those apps really leave out. They don't include any real information about island biodiversity. They just kind of use nature as like an aesthetic backdrop. They don't include any behaviors that support deeper connections to nature or to the people who live in this place or the place itself. There's no recognition of the community, so it's kind of like as if no one actually lives on these islands. And there's no focus on what's actually unique or special, so which are, you know, as we know, the factors that are most likely to encourage return. So as my team looked at this space, we thought, okay, there's a really an opportunity here to do an app that really centers nature and people. And we have some ideas about how that might work. And for islands that want to do something like that or do it differently, the challenges are actually really astronomical. Like apps are really expensive to build, they're complicated, you generally need to hire someone. Even after it launches, once you get permission from app stores to launch, you need to have someone on staff or on paid arrangement who can update it for you, things like that. So we were like, okay, we have some ideas, but we really need a partner to be able to kind of test this out and try it and see how it works. And like, who do we know that might be interested in doing this? And as it happened, sorry, Lynn, about 6 weeks after my team had this conversation, Lynn reached out, and we had started working with Lynn the year before on just relationally. And she said, hey, what do you know about building an app? Like, what is involved? And I was like, well, let's have like a totally different conversation than you were expecting, because this is actually perfect. And See and Learn was just, there are so many synergies there in terms of, you know, they're deeply invested, as you all know, in nature and in community, and had just launched this Adopt a Box project, which was collecting a lot of community stories. And we wanted community stories to be a big part of whatever we did. So what we came up with is what's called a web app. So the apps that you're all familiar with are called native apps, and those are built specifically for different platforms like iOS or Android. You have to create multiple different versions of them from every kind of device that's out there. They're expensive, blah, blah, blah. But what we can do is build an app that's actually served on the internet, which means that any device that you get the internet on, this is going to work on and look really good and be really functional. They're faster and less expensive to build, and the really cool thing is that once you build these, we can hand this app over to our partners and they can control their own content, because essentially the backend just looks like Squarespace or something else, so it's really user-friendly. And again, it'll function everywhere that you could want, and no approval from app stores. Like, this is something you can actually own and run and make look the way that you want. And so the app had 5 goals. I'm just going to read these quickly. Increase visibility and appreciation for island biodiversity, increase community connections to and pride in local biodiversity, provide new ways for people to directly engage with local nature, promote the value of nature as a tourism draw, and increase on-island iNaturalist observations, because again, that's just such a useful tool, right? Both in terms of understanding what's there and the health of those populations, and in planning how to protect species and habitats. And for audience-wise, you know, we did not want to build an app that was just for tourists. Like, tourists are wonderful, they're so important, they're really critical to those economies, but like, this should also be for the people who actually live on the island. So the audiences that we're thinking about as we design are on-island adults, on-island kids, classroom and educators, tourists, both those actually on the island as well as those considering visitation, government and NGO or conservation sectors, and hospitality and tourism sectors. And this is a lot of words. You don't need to look at it. The only two important things on this page are that we are planning to launch by spring 2023, and that we are currently in the proof of concept phase. So when I say that you're seeing this early, like you are seeing this very early. So a lot of what's coming up may change or get tweaked or built out further. And just quickly, I wanted to recognize these folks. There are a lot of people at the Academy working on this, but this is the core team. As you can see, there's multiple different departments here. We have designers, we have user experience people, we have developers, we have content people. But 5 colleagues I'm really proud to work with, so just wanted to show you their faces. And this is what we have so far. So because, again, this is a web app, it will serve beautifully on both desktop views on the left and as an actual app. And the colors for the app were sampled from images of Saba itself, so I think it's looking really beautiful. And what's also interesting is that we have to kind of design around the fact that on islands you might have less connectivity or bandwidth, but when people are viewing it at home on a desktop app, we can build in more features and kind of a richer experience, and then a more streamlined one if you're actually using it on island. And so we're thinking 5 sections right now: an about section, a hikes and trails, a nature section, organizations, and community stories. We'll get more into those in a second, but just so you know what's coming up. So about Saba page, just we want to come at it right away and tell people what is special and unique, how it came to be, what's worth paying attention to here. But what I really want to call your attention to is this Ask a Local module, the yellow block in the middle. And what this will be is a way to showcase as many people as we can or as want to participate on Saba itself. So we really want to reach out to lots of folks and also get suggestions for people we should talk to, and create kind of a database of 10s up to 50, it really doesn't matter. This will serve differently every single time. So as you explore this app, you're going to meet someone else on Saba every time that you do that. And here's the nature section. So we're going to feature native and keystone species here, and also integrate iNatural's observations into the place that you're looking, so you can really see where those observations have shown up and where you might be likely to see them. And this module is the Ask a Scientist module. And what we want to do with this is showcase people whose work directly connects to Saba itself. Not just Academy scientists, anyone who's doing work that is integral to Saba, we want to feature them here. Here's the hiking and walking section. We're still playing with this, but you can kind of see we've got an easy way to explore it, kind of think about how long it'll take, how hard it is, so people can make decisions about that. Again, building in iNatural's observations, so you can look at that trail and actually see what you might find along the way. And again, building in the Ask a Local. And this is, we're thinking text-based directions. This may turn into visual highlights, but a lot of times we want, people will have more confidence in like continuing to go or going a little further, or just feeling like they're doing a good job of hiking if they actually feel like they have some guidance along the way. So here's our community story section. We're excited about this. And really the point of this is to provide a richer understanding of and a deeper connection to Saba's people and culture. Like it is so different to go someplace and not actually connect with the people there versus to go meet people, have relationships, see them again, learn about their lives. So we certainly want to surface some of the history, but also just personal stories, because those are really, really powerful, as well as location-specific stories, so sites and buildings. And what we can do with all of this is create a number of itineraries or walking routes where people can kind of meet those stories along the way. And Adopt-a-Box is obviously a wonderful example of this, so that would certainly be one of our itineraries here. So just like a really great way to explore. And Nature and Culture Org. So these kinds of groups are doing really critical work, but they get very, very little visibility. So we can showcase those groups, and we've picked on Kai here. But we can showcase these groups. We can also talk about the really important projects happening, whether it's the Saba Conservation Foundation, whether it's a local library or a museum. These are also gateways where people can kind of become more connected to the island itself. And then Ask an Expert really centers the folks doing the work, because they have really passionate and powerful stories sometimes, so we want to show them off. And this is a super boring slide, but I'm just going to walk through a couple of these really quickly, because this is how we design for different audiences. We imagine the experience that they might have. So in this, we have an on-island visitor. So imagine that they land at the airport, they see a QR code for the app on a sign there, they launch it, they check out the home screen, they explore the community stories and the biodiversity page, and then they kind of pick an itinerary to explore. So already at this point, they're having a completely different experience of the island than they may have otherwise. And here we have some on-island students. So let's imagine that they load the desktop version of this in the classroom with a teacher, and then they kind of go through the app, they pass through the website, or the home screen rather, and they choose a trail and they have a virtual field trip. So they're looking at this trail, they're looking at all the species observations along the trail, and then they dive in and they learn more about one particular species. And maybe they even go home that night and show their parents the same thing on mobile, and then they all actually go check out the trail and make some observations the next day. And here we have like an overseas potential visitor. So maybe they see the link on a tourism advertisement, or whether maybe they're on like iNaturalist and they see a project link there, or a link on one of the projects there. So they load the homepage, and we know at this point that they're going to explore all kinds of things. So we can, again, serve them a much richer understanding of what they might expect to see and do and experience, and who they might meet when they visit. And that is really it. I hope that was close to 15 minutes. If you have any thoughts, or if you're excited about it, or if you hate it, or if you have ideas about who we could feature, please pull out your phones and take a photo of this slide. That app will take you, or that link rather, will take you to a really easy Google form where you can put all of that. And if you hate Google Forms, you're also welcome to just email me directly. But that is it. We hope that you're a little bit excited and really welcome your input, and look forward to sharing more. Thanks.
So how cool is that for SEBA? So we're going to be the prototype for other ones in the world, and what a great thing. Thank you. And you can see why we're so excited to be partnering with an organization like this, huh? Yeah. Okay. So tonight, oops, I need a clicker. Let's get on to our main story here. Sorry. Uh-oh. Wrong way. Okay, so here we go. Tonight, as always, our live streaming is brought to you by Carib Trans. It's the wonderful freight forwarder who supports us, and we got their okay today. We're picking up a check in a couple weeks, so thank you very much, Carib Trans. Our guest speaker tonight is sponsored by El Momo Cottages. Andres is here, and he and his partner run El Momo Cottages, and Andres is also a board member. It's a wonderful, great place to stay with incredible million-dollar views. So thank you, Andres, for hosting our speaker this evening. And none of our month-long events would be possible without the government of SEBA, which is Public Entity SEBA, and Prince Bernhard Culture Funds, which allows us to provide a stipend for our speakers who have come to SEBA. And then we have our 50-plus sponsors. Every one of them is important and helps us, so we appreciate if you appreciate them and show your support to them. And the final thing you can do, if you just help us by writing a review, it really helps us with funding and everything we do and gives us more credibility. So if you can take 5 minutes and write a review on great nonprofits, that's really helpful. We have business cards we can hand you so you can easily find that. Raffle tickets, I think we're beating a dead horse, but in case there's some home viewers, you can contact us. We can set up international payments, and you've got a few more days, $5,000 worth of prizes on a small venue. You got a great chance to win. So upcoming events. Tomorrow morning, our speaker tonight is doing a really cool hike, 2 different destinations to show you how she studies volcanoes in a different way, which obviously we'll get into tonight. That's at 8 o'clock. At 7 o'clock tomorrow night, we have our second of 3 night hikes, and that is our crab expert, who says he will definitely feel better by then. But that should be really cool with the big, crazy land crabs. And then Sunday night, we are at the Eco Lodge. So we are doing a presentation in the rainforest, special evening, great dinner menu. So make sure you don't miss out on that. And so here we are tonight. Here's our opening intro. So TGIF, thank you for doing something different on Friday, but thank God it's Florentine. Unfortunately, Bill Bigelow was feeling under the weather, so Florentine graciously agreed to switch nights with him. Talk about going with the flow. Since the end of 2018, now this is when we're going to teach you some new words that she's going to clarify. Florentine Zwillich has been studying at McGill University. She visited SEBA several times since 2019 to collect rock samples from different areas on SEBA to better understand the magmatic system beneath. These rocks contain specific crystals called Plagioclase, which she uses to study the evolution of magmatic systems over time. Besides looking at crystals, she is also interested in soil degassing on the island, including measurements of carbon dioxide and noble gases. Not an eruption. These gases can be reliable tools to assess, diffuse, and these gases can be a reliable tool to assess, diffuse, and concentrate degassing and efficiently detect earthquake volcano interactions in periods of quiescence at active volcanoes. Analyzing these gas emissions is strategic for detecting and interpreting precursory signals of changes in volcanic activity. In the case of Ceiba, retrieving the first information on background levels across the island. We guarantee you will lava this presentation. So please welcome Florentine.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Oh, you can leave it there. Okay, hi guys. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to talk about, actually my projects, my PhD project. And I did that on Ceiba. And I basically want to talk about two parts, as she already mentioned. The first part will be about rocks and crystals, which are therein, and what those crystals can tell us about the magmatic system beneath the volcano. And the second part will be about passive degassing on Ceiba. So I will introduce you to volcanic degassing, what is observable on Ceiba, and what we can use as monitoring tools to get information about these passive degassing. And in order to start on a bigger scale, so why actually Ceiba exists is because of the subduction of the North American plate beneath the Caribbean plate, where you have this white line here is the subduction trench where the both tectonic plates meet. And this subduction causes the active volcanic arc of the Lesser Antilles, where the red star is Ceiba. Okay, and if we're now zooming into the Earth, onto this Earth's surface and cross-cutting the volcano vertically, we would see the structure of the volcano and also the magmatic source beneath. And I guess all of you, including actually myself, learned in high school that volcano is underlined by a big liquid magma tank. But during the last decades, research has actually shown that this is not the case. So we have actually a more a complex magmatic system beneath a volcano that includes individual magmatic intrusions or magmatic pockets, like you can see here, that are connected over time. And around, like, these magmatic pockets are situated in a so-called magma mush that is basically an area of a significant amount of crystals with very, very little melt. And that makes this area very rigid and stiff. And these, we want to know, okay, does Ceiba actually show evidence for such a magmatic system? So we have to find something where we can gather this information from. And plagioclase crystals are commonly rubbed in the rocks from Ceiba. And these are very important crystals because they can record magmatic changes. What is happening here in these magma pockets in their zoning pattern. And we are using the zoning pattern to understand, okay, what was going on prior to the past eruption. So I would like to start with a general overview how volcanic rocks look like in textures. And on the left-hand side, you see a general view of that, like an illustration of a volcanic rock, where you have this ground matrix or ground mass, which consists of glass, which is basically frozen melt, and tiny little crystals, which you can't identify with the naked eye. then you have these black circles here, which are called vesicles, and this is basically just gas that got trapped inside the rock because the magma was already too cool, for example, to let the gas move through. And then you have those different squares here, which are representing crystals called phenocrysts, which can be identified with the naked eye or with a magnifying lens. And on the right-hand side, I show here a picture of a rock from Saba, actually from Bunkers Hill, like right behind us here. And you see that it shows the same texture, right? We see like this ground mass, and we see the phenocrysts, also in different colors. But what is very important here is that this rock already shows evidence that magma mixing actually occurs in the magmatic system prior to an eruption. And that is seen in the different colors. Like here in the center, it's a darker color and surrounded by a brighter color. And that is an evidence that magma mixing, two different magmas were mixing, or we are calling that mingling. So it didn't homogeneous mix, but at one point it just erupted and brought up little globules, which we can see inside the rocks. Okay, but as I showed you before, there are like several magma pockets connected. And do we know, okay, we don't know actually in this rock, looking at this rock, how many magma pockets were connected to each other. So we have to look a bit closer, and for that we're looking at plagioclases and their zoning pattern in order to gather a bit more information. So why are we using plagioclase? Because they are crystallizing over a very wide range of temperatures and pressures. Then they are very common in the rocks from Saba, and they are well known for the zoning patterns. So if you're matching a cross section of a tree, well, the center represents the old part of the tree, and then you see those tree rings growing in growth direction. Each tree ring basically represents the ambient air condition during growth. And that is basically applicable for plagioclase as well. So where you have the different zonings based on the ambient condition the crystal grew in. I hope it won't fall. Okay, and then in order to understand why we see those zoning patterns in the crystals, we have to a bit understand what are the building blocks of plagioclase. And for that, I have this slide here. So mainly, the plagioclase is a solid solution. It's so-called solid solution series. So it's made up of calcium, aluminium, sodium, silicon, and oxygen. And these two pairs, calcium, aluminium, and sodium and silicon, exchange depending on the magmatic conditions it grows in. And just to make it a bit easier, I'm just looking at calcium now. So when you have low amounts of calcium growing, then that would grow at low temperatures. And when you're increasing the amount of calcium growing from that crystal or from that magma into the crystal, that would happen at high temperatures. But if I'm saying, for example, okay, I have a plagioclase that is fully made out of calcium, aluminium, silicon, and oxygen, there wouldn't be sodium in it, and vice versa. So if there is no calcium in the zonation, there will be only sodium. And that's why it's so interesting, because depending on the magmatic condition, it changes this the amount of calcium or sodium. Okay, and in order to show you different zoning patterns that are in theory possible, I explain that now. So in the first case, we have normal zoning, which is a continuous change from the center towards rim from more calcium-rich to less calcium-rich compositions. And a case where that might happen is during magma cooling. So at high temperatures, calcium-rich zones are growing, and then with decreasing temperature, less calcium will be incorporated and more sodium. Then we do have the opposite way, where you have sodium-rich centers and calcium-rich rims. Sorry, so calcium-poor centers and calcium-rich rims. And a scenario when that can happen is actually during magma mixing, because if different magmas of different composition and also temperature mixes, that would be the result of it. Then we do have a more complex zoning pattern, which is called oscillatory zoning, and that indicates already you have a cyclic change in calcium incorporation and sodium incorporation. And a typical case when that is happening is during temperature fluctuation in the magmatic system. And then we have a more a so-called patchy zoning, which is an irregularly distributed zoning pattern. And when that is like, while the normal and the reverse zoning shows these nice concentric grow rings or zones, it's rather difficult to see that in the patchy zoning. And that is because when a crystal is growing very, very quickly, it kind of has a snowflake texture. So it's called skeletal texture. And when it starts to grow slower, like continues growing slower, it will fill up these empty spaces with a different composition, and then you would end up with the patchy zoning. And in a magmatic system, you always have changes, and these changes can result in different zoning pattern, and that includes not only temperature or pressure, but also the melt composition, the growth rate, as I said, and partial remelting, which is also called resorbing. So when a crystal is not happy anymore in the magma, it can start to remelt into the magma until it's happy again, and then continue grow. Okay, so as I said, we're using those plagioclases to identify the different magma pockets. And so, yeah, generally, what would we expect actually from the textures or chemistry that the crystals are giving us in order to say, okay, this is a magma mixing event? And for that, the textures, just looking at textures, we need to see some sort of complex zoning pattern. Then we need to see reverse zoning, like as I mentioned before, if you have a calcium poor center and a calcium rich rim, you would a scenario of that would be magma mixing. And you can maybe have some resorption textures. But, and that's the important fact, is that these textures can also be caused only by temperature or pressure changes. So it doesn't need to be involve different magma in order to create those textures. And for that reason, we also need to analyze the chemistry and looking at specific elements. And these elements are called trace elements, which are incorporated during the growth. And when different magmas are mixing, they're bringing a different signal of trace elements with them, which then are incorporated into the zoning. And we can use that to identify those processes. So in order to get the plagioclases, I first read up what is known about the island, and Rubel and Smith did a very detailed study a few decades ago and collected rock samples and created this nice geological map, which is basically showing you differences and similarities of the rock samples on Saba. And for example, the different colors, the brown and the orange color, are representing domes, which are those little hills all around the island. And the different colors are saying, okay, these are young domes, these are older domes. And the same is valid for the yellow and the pink color, which is a different rock type called block and ash flow. But the different colors also representing different ages. And I decided to collect rock samples from mainly dome deposits, but importantly to get these in varying ages, to get different compositions, and to get it from different locations on Saba. And I did that in order to have a wide range of different crystals which might have come from different locations in the magmatic system. Okay, and after sampling, I went back to Canada and I had a look at the rocks. And usually we're cutting those rocks in very thin slices. We're looking under the microscope, and then you would see this here. We were using this in order to identify the crystal assemblage of the rocks. And I'm not going into what different crystals you see, but those transparent squares here are all plagioclase crystals. And in order to see if I have actually zoning pattern in the crystals from Saba, I can use the microscope and let the light pass through in particular directions. And then I end up with this image where you see some sort of, maybe the back don't, but you see some sort of zoning pattern. But the microscope is not detailed enough to give me a very good view about the zoning pattern, and for that I need to use a different technique, which is called scanning electron microscope. It's this device or instrument is shown here, and it uses an electron beam and scans the sample surface, and this electron beam interacts with the different individual zones of the crystal differently. So for example, calcium-rich rims are interacting more with the electron beam and will result in light grayscales, colors. And then calcium-poor rims are reacting less with the beam and will result in darker grayscales, colors, sorry. And these 4 images are basically from one rock sample, and this rock sample is coming from Saba Electric, like behind that building. And what I've done is I looked at hundreds of crystals and I tried to group them based on their textures. So I came up with 4 groups that mainly are characterized as the one type having this oscillatory center, followed by a resorption texture, which is like the crystal was unhappy in the magma and then started to remelt into the magma. And then at one point was happy again and then started to crystallize the rim, a calcium-rich rim. Then the type B crystals are characterized showing only oscillatory zoning with or without a calcium-rich rim. The type C is characterized as having this calcium-rich center followed by oscillatory zoning, and some of them have a calcium-rich rim and some of them don't. And while type A and type B I have seen most in this rock sample, type C was less, and type D is the least crystal type I've seen in that rock. And that is characterized as having this old resorption center, followed also by oscillatory zoning and a calcium-rich rim. Okay, so first summary, we have complex zoning pattern, right? It's like you see a lot of black and white and grayscales. Okay, but as I mentioned before, textures are not enough. So we also need to look at the chemistry, and I did that with an instrument called laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy coupled to an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer, which is called shortly LIPS, coupled to an ICP-MS, where I get these major building blocks by the LIPS system and these trace elements by the ICP-MS system. and that uses a laser which shoots an individual zone and removes some nanograms of the material. And this material and the interaction with this high energy laser vaporizes and ionizes the material until a plasma is created with highly energized electrons. And when this plasma cools down, the electrons are relaxing, and then light is emitted. And this light is detected by this LIP system and then converted into a spectrum. And this spectrum shows basically the different wavelengths and the intensity of how much of the individual wavelength was actually detected from this light. And each of these peaks are representing an element. And then during this laser ablation, we call that, also particles are removed. And these are transported with a gas flow coming from here towards the ICP-MS, where they also get vaporized, ionized, and then analyzed by the trace elements. And then here on the lower right, we see the typical diagram of the trace elements here listed, and then on the y-axis, the concentration. Okay, and I think because you might be interested how it looks like when I actually analyze them, I brought a little video. And but first of all, I want to show you the laboratory where the LIP system is here on the right, which contains the laser, and there is a little chamber where the sample is in. On the left-hand side, you have the ICP-MS, and those both instruments are connected with a tube. And on this panel here, you see the spectrum, which is instantly given during the analysis, which you will see shortly. And this part here is basically the sample surface of a crystal with the little craters here showing you prior analysis. So that's basically a kind like 50 microns in width or diameter. So very, very small. And when I run it, you see this light. And meanwhile this is running, I get a lot of spectra here. So after analyzing thousands of individual zoning, I had a look at the data. And what I found, so I'm on this slide, I'm going to explain it on the same rock sample from Cyber Electric. And what I found is that I indeed find commonalities in the chemistry of major and trace elements, looking at the zoning of the crystals. So, for example, the centers here of the type C crystal have all the same major and trace elements. The oscillatory zoning, which can be seen actually in all type crystals, have the same major and trace element composition, meaning even though I can distinguish them by the texture, at one point they were all together growing in the same magma. And and because these oscillatory zoning happened like in different ways in between the different types, that's rather an effect of temperature differences, for example, or fluctuations. And then you have the resorption textures, which are also showing the same major and trace element composition. And the most important fact now is the rim zone here, because the rim is basically the last zone which was grown prior to the eruption. And we're I checked, or like I looked up what the major and trace elements are giving me, or what they're telling me. And internally, they are having the same major and trace elements, but if I'm comparing these zones to prior zonings, the trace element composition is different. And that means it indicates that these crystals mixed, or the crystals crystallized from a mixing magma event. So there were two magmas involved, which changed the melt composition, and then the crystals grew this rim composition. And what I did for this sample, I also did for all the different rock types I have investigated, and I saw the exact similar processes. So they all show kind of the different types here, and the chemistry also indicates that the rim texture is a magma mixing signal. But what I still don't know, and I still need to investigate, is if actually some of the, for example, the centers of one rock type is the same as the rim of another rock type. And that would give me some understanding, okay, even though those two rocks were erupted at two different times or points, they're coming from the same magma. And if I'm doing that, comparing all the different rocks, I can build up this magmatic system. And I guess I should break for some questions. Okay. Are there any questions before I continue? Yes.
So how many samples did you collect?
Oh, I collected in total, I think, 100 kilograms, or 80 to 100 kilograms. But I looked at 7 or 8 samples, and then hundreds of crystals. Yeah.
Is that boring into the ground or surface rocks? How do you collect them?
You need to find. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, so the first question was about how many rocks I have collected, and the second one was how I collect the samples. And for that, I need to find fresh surface of rock. So I need to kind of hammer on the rocks and get very nicely not altered. We call that altered because there is no overprint of water influence or erosion or something like that. So it needs to be fresh. So we need to hammer it, like break it apart from the deposit.
But they're from the surface.
Yeah, yeah. Yes?
The samples you were just describing, were they mainly the peaks, or were they a diversity of different sample types? And if they were a diversity, did you find like spatial differences in your interpretation of the data?
Okay, so the question was if they were mainly from the domes, right? Yeah, okay. Yes, so I choose that because block and ash flows, the rock type is a bit different to collect because how they are produced is sometimes due to gravitational collapse, and then I get a mixing of different rock types, and I don't want that. I want to have a fresh rock which is actually representing only one eruption. And the second question was if those are connected or are showing differences. And the 7 or 8 samples I've investigated came from different locations on the island, but I do see the same crystals, textures, and kind of the same processes, what they're going through. Yeah. You're welcome. Yes?
Were you surprised by any of those findings?
Yes, if I was surprised to find that out, yes, because I expected actually to see a bit more of a difference. Yeah. Okay. So, and now I would like to go away from the history of the magmatic system towards what is the magmatic system doing now. And for that I'm trying to introduce you to volcanic degassing, what is seen on Ceiba, and what type of monitoring tools I can use to analyze or to characterize these degassing. And to start off, what is volcanic degassing? So when you have this magma, usually gases are always dissolved. So if you imagine you have a soda bottle, and before you open it, there are no bubbles inside, right? But when you open it, then the pressure is released and bubbles rising in the bottle. And that would be the same for dissolved gases. So if there is an earthquake, for example, or if the magma is moving, then those bubbles can separate from the magma and can move upwards through the crust, sometimes meeting with the hydrothermal aquifer beneath the volcano, and then finally can be released through plumes during eruption, for example. But you also can have fumaroles, crater fumaroles. Then you can have gas degassing passively through soil or at hot springs, but you can also have these degassing through faults and fractures. And in the community, we're subdividing degassing into active degassing and passive degassing. And active degassing is mainly during eruptive phases. So, for example, here in Hawaii, here is the volcano actually erupting right now, and it releases these gas plumes. And these gases are containing the most diverse gas species, mainly having water and carbon dioxide in it, but also reactive gases as sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide and hydrogen chloride, and some minor trace elements. Minor or trace species, sorry. But these are not seen on Ceiba, and we are very happy about that, right? And then we have passive degassing, which can occur on crater fumaroles, and those gases can actually reach up to 700 degrees Celsius. The chemistry is pretty much the same as for active degassing, just with a different abundancy. And these gases are also not seen on the island, but what we do see are hot springs. For example, here the hot spring opposite of Green Island, and these or soil degassing as well on the flanks of the volcano, and these gases don't really or rarely reach 100 degrees Celsius. And the importance is that they are non-reactive, because only specific gases can actually move through the soil without being modified or anything. And these gases include carbon dioxide and the noble gases helium and radon. And that's mainly the project I'm going to do after the See and Learn program. So why am I interested into soil degassing? Because on Ceiba, it's the only surface expression what the volcano is doing. Then it helps us to understand what is going on inside the volcano, and the chemistry of the gases tells us information about the source of the gases. So if they're coming from the magma, if there is a hydrothermal signal, if it's groundwater, rain, or if it's biological. And the goal is to understand the passive degassing during volcanic activity of quiescence on Ceiba, by identifying, first of all, the locations, so where that is actually like in larger amounts, then to understand the fluxes, so how much actually is released, and the composition to get the source information. And I'm gonna do this by analyzing the CO2, so the carbon dioxide, the radon, and the helium. And starting off with the carbon dioxide, I will use an accumulation chamber. It's this one, which is basically pushed into the soil. And then with time, I'm using a CO2 detector inside, and I'm analyzing the concentration over time. And from that, I'm going to calculate the flux. And I'm doing that on 4 different locations, which I suspect there is more more degassing happening, including one reference location where I expect no, or rather less degassing. And meanwhile, this the CO2 is accumulating. I will also retrieve gas into to sample the gas and to analyze the carbon isotopes. And just a reminder what isotopes are. They are a member of a family of an element, for example, carbon, where in nature carbon is isotopes are C12, C13, and C14. And just an example, plants are taking more C12 during the chemical process of photosynthesis, and magmatic gases usually have more C13 in the gases. So by looking at the ratio of those two isotopes, I can get an information, okay, is that actually a magmatic signal, or is it coming from the plants, for example? And then I also will do gas sampling for helium isotope analysis, which is kind of the same principle. In nature we have helium-4 and helium-3, and helium-3 is more abundant in the magmatic gas. And by again analyzing the ratio, I can understand, okay, if this signature, if that signature is coming from the gases, magmatic gases. And then besides these 4 locations, I will also do a radon measurement survey across the island, where there's also an accumulation chamber attached to those discs here, which are measuring the concentration of radon coming out of the soil, and where high concentration of radon is measured, we can expect falls and fractures, because those falls and fractures are kind of pathways for the gas to escape to the surface. And in summary, and what I want to give you as a take-home message, is that the textures of volcanic rocks from Saber are showing evidence of magma mixing or magma mingling. Then we can use the crystals to distinguish different magmatic processes, such as magma mixing or temperature fluctuations. Then the first data exploration revealed that we have similar processes happening between the rocks prior to eruptions. And then I talked about volcanic degassing, that Saber is showing you passive soil degassing and hot springs. Then I showed some monitoring tools I can use to monitor these gases. And during my field project this year, I'm going to identify locations of larger amounts of passive degassing. And I'm doing that in order to understand where the source is coming from. And yes, last slide. And I would like to thank some people who, this work wouldn't have been possible. First of all, the government of Saber, because they allowed me to take the rock samples and do the surveys. Then some locals, including Kai Wolf, Jelle van der Velde, and Oliver Klockman. And I think Oliver is actually not a local? Jelle is here, yeah. Because they helped me to collect some rock samples on the coast, and everyone who is who keeps Elske updated about observation on the island, and of course Jan Learn to give me the opportunity to talk about my research. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes.
So we were diving this week, and there are some spots, some dive sites that have brown sand that's warm.
Okay.
Is that an evidence of off-gassing then too?
That's probably hot spring. Is it like, sorry, yeah, I repeat the question. Some locals, I guess? You're visitors?
Yeah, we're visitors.
Okay.
We're just diving on some of the sites offshore.
Okay.
There's a couple places where they showed us sand that's browner than the other sand on the bottom.
Yeah.
And if you put your hands in there, it's warm.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was evidence of off-gassing happening offshore then too.
Yeah, yeah. So some visitors went diving and they found brown spots, which when you touch it, it's hotter than the surrounding material, and indeed that is a hot spring, yeah, where gases are coming out and giving the heat to warm that area. Yep.
That's on the opposite side of the island. So does that indicate that it's coming in a lot of different places? Or?
Yeah. So the question is because green. The hot spring opposite of Green Island is actually on the north side of the island, but the visitors went on the west side of the island to dive and found this hot spring, and indeed there are several hot springs actually in the literature also reported, which includes that part of the area, but it is difficult for me to sample that. Even like the northern part, I tried it 2 years ago, and the ocean input is just too much that we can't really get a gas sample out of it.
Your question is, does the location mean that there's off-gassing everywhere?
Yes. Yeah, like so if the off-gassing is coming from the volcano on different location, that's possible, yes. It's like along the flanks. And often it's also more related to fault systems. Like when you have bigger faults in the substructure of the volcano, then the gases can easily move upwards and then following these faults.
So it's following a weak spot to the surface.
Yeah, it's following a weak spot, yeah. Yes?
Do you know where the central location of activity is around the island or within the island, or is that part of your research?
So if I know where the central heat of the magmatic system is, no, I don't know it, but I can kind of detect these faults. And these faults are mainly weak spots, as you already said, where the gas can easily escape. And also potentially, like if ever it's going to shift towards more activity, magma pathways as well, for magma. Depending on the size of the fracture though. Okay, yeah.
So in order to assess that, you said you were doing like a survey across the island of radon?
Yeah.
And so is that like a grid, or how do you determine where?
Yeah, I try to do a grid, but it's rather difficult because of the high and dense vegetation on the island. So it will be probably along the trails and then partly away from the trails. Yeah, yeah, it's a good point.
How many fault lines have you detected so far and do you think are out there?
So in the literature, because these hot springs are on the northeast side and the southwest side, there was indication that there is a fault coming from southwest to northeast. But I haven't detected anything yet, so that's basically the goal of this year's project. Yeah.
How long will your research be in total?
Pardon? Can you?
How long will the research be in total?
How long my research will be in total? Do you mean like including everything or the project on Saber?
Let's start with the project on Saba and then everything what still comes after.
Okay, so the project on Saber will take approximately 10 days. I will be 10 days here after the program ends. And in total, I'm in my 4th year now.
What levels of radon are you getting?
What levels of radon?
Radon.
I I don't know yet. No, I have no clue. So I will see that next week, and I can give you the information next week. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if everyone found that very interesting, I hope. We have plenty of space on tomorrow's hike. You can join her. It would be helpful for us to know if you're joining because we're organizing a taxi for 8 a.m. It's good to know if we need more than one taxi, but by all means, there's still space. Thank you very much. It was excellent. Most of you are staying for dinner, so we're just going to need a few minutes. If you want to go toward the bar, that's probably the most helpful thing you could do. That means get out of the way. We're going to move some chairs and get this screen down before it snaps. And by all means, let Emily or Alexis know if you want to do the hike tomorrow night or if anything else we can help you with. And thank you very much for coming. Oh, hold on, one more question.
Where's the hike?
The hike is going to be, the taxi is going to take you to what's called the Green Dump. That's where, for our non-local people, it's not bad. It's a natural area where they unfortunately do get rid of rocks and natural like cuttings from trees and such. But she's going to measure the gases there, and that won't take so long. And then the hike is going to start at where Spring Bay starts, and most of it will be shaded to get to an area where she can explain more. So it'll be enough of a hike to feel good, but not like a killer hike. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, join us for our next presentation, field projects. And thank you again very much, Florentine, and everyone for coming both in person and virtually.
Miami is known as an international community and the hub of trade and logistics for the Caribbean and Americas. A leader in the freight logistics industry, Caribtrans has served the Caribbean region for more than 30 years, with a footprint that has grown from one island to now serving the majority, as well as Central and South America. Caribtrans is an NVOCC, a non-vessel operating common carrier, meaning it has the same responsibilities as a shipper without owning the vessels or planes. Its primary customers, individuals who ship clothing, electronics and other personal items, and occasionally cars.
Most of the stuff that they're sending is because they don't get it there. So for us to provide it on two services, air and ocean, we can give it a choice of how fast you want it. So if you want it really fast, we're gonna send it by air, you're gonna have it next day, sometimes even the same day.
That on-time service has been the key to Caribtrans' success, whether shipping by air or by sea. The company moves about 5,000 TEUs of freight each year, more than any NVOCC in the region. And since it joined the Saltchuk family of transportation companies a couple of years ago, Caribtrans can offer customers even more shipping options.
Other NVOCCs, they depend on other shipping lines that are not part of their family. So they need to rely on whether they're going to sell or not, whether they are late or not. It doesn't happen to us because it's part of our family of companies. We control the service that we give.
Sí, buenos días, por favor, con Diana.
Quality service is what keeps customers coming back. Customers are treated like family, and when they leave to research competitors, it doesn't usually last long.
They have left and they have come back because they've said that, you know, nobody does it better than Caribtrans. So because of that relationship.
That exceptional service includes consolidation. Customers can have freight sent here and stored for free for up to a month, then consolidated and shipped on to the islands and Americas, a perk for the region's growing small business market. Puerto Rico is an expanding market for Caribtrans, about the size of Connecticut and rich in history and culture. Puerto Rico is home to many pharmaceutical manufacturers, as well as a thriving tourism industry for which Caribtrans moves raw materials and supplies. But serving small businesses is still the company's bread and butter here in San Juan. Businesses like Caldera Café, a local coffee company. Owner Alfredo Rodriguez started growing coffee beans at his mountain farm about 20 years ago. He recently ordered a variety of new equipment for his farm and shop. He uses CaribTrans because it consolidates shipments, which cuts down on the number of times he has to pay the Puerto Rico import tax.
Not many companies want to do that. They want only big cargoes and maybe half container or full containers, but they don't want to consolidate because it's more difficult.
Turning challenges into opportunities is what CaribTrans does, and that includes helping to grow small businesses like Caldera Café by taking the hassle out of shipping.
We can be a gateway to expand their business in the Caribbean and back to the U.S. And wherever they can sell their products, we are also going to be a partner for them.
That customer dedication has made CaribTrans what it is today. Now, as part of a larger family with more transportation resources, CaribTrans hopes to grow beyond its current market, offering services to additional Latin American ports and eventually Europe and Asia. But even when it becomes a global logistics company, CaribTrans wants to stay true to its roots, always providing personalized, reliable customer service and a commitment to the communities it serves.